sponsored. Tonight's Majlis is sponsored for the Isale Sahab of Marhum Ghulam Abbas Fazal of Bukhara. Please recite Surah Fatiha.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الغوي الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير الناصرين والصلاة والسلام على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل إن شاء الله. ورد عن إمام زين العابدين عليه السلام وأما حق بطنك فأن لا تجعله وعاء لقليل من الحرام ولا لكثير وأن تقتصد له في الحلال ولا تخرجه من حد التقوية إلى حد التهوين وذهاب المروة. آمنا به صدق الإمام عليه السلام. اللهم صل على محمد. Dear scholars, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In Risalat al-Huquq, the 50 rights that Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam begins to expand on, one of the rights he begins to expound on is the rights of the stomach. And he explains beautifully that the stomach of the human being has certain rights over the human being himself. That because we are free beings, we have the aql, our stomachs have a right on us, and we need to adhere to these rights. And these are the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given our stomachs. And from amongst the rights, he says, do not make it a vessel for that which is haram. Do not consume that which is haram, not a little of it, nor a lot of it. And when you look at the aspects of eating and drinking according to the Islamic thought, or the Islamic viewpoint, it's one of the pleasures of the human being, that we are naturally created to enjoy eating and drinking. And what's beautiful is that the religion of Islam, when it approaches certain innate instinctual pleasures of the human being, it approaches it from the viewpoint of wisdom. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instilled certain natural instinctive pleasures within us, but explains to us that we need to carry out these pleasures through wisdom and not necessarily through our desires. So when you look at, for example, the idea of marriage, when you ask a youth, why is it that you got married, or why was it that you were forced yourself into marriage, the typical answer that we hear is that because I had certain needs and I fulfilled those needs, or I can fulfill those needs by getting married. As of course the riwayat of the Ahl al-Bayt are there, that a person should get married when he reaches a certain position in his life, he should look towards marriage. Because there are certain desires and certain needs that he needs to fulfill in the halal. But if the core and the sole idea of marriage is to fulfill one's needs, it's a very shallow way of looking at marriage, according to the scholars, the opinions of the scholars, and the opinions of the Ahlul Bayt as well. That if I was to get married with the sole reason and the purpose of fulfilling my needs, this is a very shallow way of approaching marriage. If I am not committed in sacrificing some of my needs, for example, in sacrificing my way of life, in compromising some things in my life, and for example, taking on the responsibility of being a husband and a father, that marriage itself will not be fruitful. Yes, if the sole reason of me getting married is to fulfill my desires and my desires only, then that marriage is bound to fail. Because when these desires are met, a month later, 2 months later, 5 months later, when these desires are met, and then what? The human being, you find he hits a brick wall. He doesn't know what to do in his life anymore. Yes, why? Because those desires are being met. And so he needs to look towards new desires, for example. And at times, it spirals out of control. So when you look at the opinions of the ulama, which is built upon the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt, they explain that the purpose of marriage is not to fulfill one's desires. To fulfill one's desires is a means to an end. What's the end? To have children, to raise a family, to bring in more Shias in the world. Yes? To conceive and to bring in more children who are the followers of the Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. So the idea of marriage is changed according to the opinions of the Ahlul Bayt. It's approached from a more wise perspective. It's approached through wisdom, that the purpose of marriage is to have children. Likewise, when it comes to eating and drinking is one of the innate pleasures of the human being, to the extent that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran, as well as the Ahlul Bayt in their riwayat, explain that certain pleasures in heaven will be the pleasures of eating and drinking. In Surah Al-Waqi'ah, we have a number of verses that the people of the right hand shall have, for example, wine to drink. Yes, they will have birds to eat. These are pleasures and fruits, for example. They will have access to certain types of fruits. These are all pleasures of eating and drinking, as well as the people of hell. Their punishments is what? That they will consume from the shajar al-zaqqum, that they will eat from a tree that is known as the tree of zaqqum. And when they are thirsty, they will be given what? Ma'al hamim. They will be given boiling water. So you find pleasure and punishment is also used via eating and drinking. But the purpose, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, in this particular area of Risalat al-Huquq, he begins to examine the hadaf, the purpose of why we eat and drink. The reasons why we eat and drink is not to gain pleasure from that taste of eating and drinking purely. No, the purpose of eating and drinking is so that we can direct our energy that we get from eating and drinking and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That whatever we consume, the energy that we develop within ourselves, we can direct it towards Allah and worship Him and Him alone. So you find here Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam begins to examine the wisdom behind eating and drinking. That the purpose of eating and drinking is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He begins his examination of the rights of the stomach by saying that one should not consume that which is haram, and we should consume that which is halal. We find this in the Holy Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas, kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba, wa la tattabi'u khutuwati shaytan, innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. O mankind, have access, whatever you have access on this earth, eat that which is lawful for you. Which means that there are certain things which are not lawful for us. So when the Imam says, أَلَّا تَجْعَلَهُ وِعَاءً لِقَلِيلٍ مِّنَ الْحَرَامِ وَلَا لِكَثِيرٍ, do not consume that which is haram, not a little of it nor a lot of it. Question is, what is considered to be haram? There are three categories of food which are considered to be haram. The first is what we know of according to the ahkam. There is, for example, the ayah of the Holy Quran, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ وَالدَّمُ وَلَحْمِ الْخِنْزِيرِ, for example. That the food which is not considered to be halal, the meat which is not halal is haram on the human being. The consumption of blood is haram. The flesh of swine is considered to be haram. In other verses, for example, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ, that the consumption of alcohol is haram as well. But what's interesting is that the Imam says, do not consume a little of it nor a lot of it. It's a very strange statement that the Imam is making. If I had a liter of water, as an example, if I had a liter of water and I said to you, do not drink a sip from it, is there a need for me to say, do not drink a glass from it? Do not drink a sip from this liter of water. That means that by awlawiyya, by priority, drinking more than a sip is haram as well. But the Imam says, do not eat a little and do not eat a lot from it. So why does he say that? Do not eat a little and do not eat a lot from that which is haram. The reason is because at times we find or we try to justify our actions by belittling sins sometimes. Yes? We say to ourselves, well, this was just a sip. When Allah is Ghafurur Rahim, if this is just a sip, then it doesn't have much effect in my body. Or for example, when we go to the supermarkets, they have samples that they give out. When they want to try and propose a new product, if that product is haram, we may say to ourselves, well, this is just a sample, it's just a bite. It's more biting. I mean, it does no harm to us in our bodies. Physically, it does no harm to us. Yes, the Imam alayhi salam says, and he's alluding to a fact, that when we consume something that which is haram, whether it's small in amount or large in amount, physically it may not have an effect on us in our body, but spiritually it can destroy us from within. That when a person, for example, consumes that which is small in amount. Take the example of alcohol. There's a particular limit of alcohol that if we were to consume, it has an effect on our minds. But if we were to consume less than that particular amount, it has no effect on us. Technically speaking, biologically speaking, it has no effect on us. But the Imam alayhi salam says that yes, biologically it may not have an effect on you, but spiritually it may destroy you from within. It may destroy your nafs. And in fact, when you refer to the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, in the previous nights we spoke about the nafs and how the nafs interacts with ibadah. Yes, there's a narration from the Ahlul Bayt where they say, and many narrations, they say that one of the greatest ways to destroy the nafs is through eating and drinking. That if you want to destroy your nafs from within, if you want to make it weak, if you want to kill your own nafs, do so by eating and drinking. Consume that which is haram and you will do a very good job of killing your own nafs. So you find here, eating and drinking has a great connection with our nafs. And that we have to make sure that we eat that which is halal and stay away from that which is haram. That's why when you come towards the laws of eating and drinking, one of the most difficult laws is the laws of eating and drinking. To the extent that if something is doubtful, one cannot eat something that is doubtful. You need to be certain that the meat that you eat is halal. If you have 80%, for example, if you're certain 80%, that's still not enough. You need to be 90, 95%, 99% that this particular meat that I am consuming is halal. Anything less than 90%, we should refrain from. And this is of course within our ahkam, and this is the opinions of the maraji as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Ya Ali. So the first area of that which is haram is certain aspects. For example, Maita is haram, Khamar is haram, alcohol, the flesh of swine, pigs are haram to consume. The second category is what is known as A'yan and Najisa. Things which are considered to be najis, the 10 things that are najis found in Tawdih al-Masail, all of them are considered to be haram to consume. Whether it's urine, whether it's blood, whether it's feces, all of these are considered to be haram to consume. Then the third area, which is aspects which are considered to be haram to consume, is an interesting one. You see, at times, the food that is laid on the table may be halal. The meat that is provided for me by my family is halal. Yes, but it becomes haram when I consume it. Which type of food? The food that is bought through money that is haram. If I have an income which is haram, for example, yes, I earn a living through riba, for example, establishing interests in my contracts, or I have stolen wealth from someone and I have built an enterprise from that particular wealth, all of that means that the wealth and the profit that comes into my account is haram. And if I was to buy from that particular money and I provide my family with that money, it's as if I am feeding my family with food that is haram as well. If we, for example, were to buy food that is haram and I feed my family with that food, it affects my children. 20 years later, if my son or my daughter leaves the religion of Islam, it's because of my actions, because of my earnings. If my earnings were haram and I provided my child with that money, that food, it has a spiritual effect on that child. And that child will not move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It will move away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason is because when we consume food, that food turns into energy. And as the Imam alayhi salam explains, that energy should then be directed towards ibadah. But when I consume food that is haram, it creates what? Energy that is shaitani. It doesn't create energy which is rahmani. Yes, when I have energy that builds up inside of me from consuming that which is haram, this is what is known as energy which is considered to be shaitani. When I have satanic energy within me, that will not be used towards ibadah. That will definitely not be used towards ibadah. Far from it. Yes, you find, for example, when a person consumes haram, he begins to neglect his salah. Before he used to pray on time, but now slowly it has no effect on him. Praying on time no longer is part of his lifestyle. He begins to delay his prayers. Soon he begins to delay his prayers. Soon after that, he neglects his prayers altogether. I guarantee you, if you have friends or you have family members who consume that which is haram, see how their relationship is with their ibadat. See how their relationship is with coming to the mosque, for example. Wherever Allah is known to be present, you find that these people are far away from that particular area. And by that I mean in religious gatherings, for example. Those who consume haram, they are far from religious gatherings, because this is the effect that has internally within us. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the Imam alayhi salam says, do not consume that which is little, do not consume that which is a lot. Because when we consume a little, sometimes you'll find, and this is a debate even amongst the scientists themselves, that when we consume that which is little, we may think that it has no effect biologically in our bodies. We may think that, for example, it has no effect according to science. Actually, according to science, many of the articles that are coming out now, that if a person was to consume little amounts of alcohol, and this is of course established within the Holy Quran, it is beneficial for the human body. Yes, it is actually a benefit for the human body. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the effects, the negative impact that it has on the human body is far greater than the positive impact it has on the human body. What Allah is referring to are the spiritual effects. The spiritual effects that it has on the human being. And some people came forward and they asked the question. It's an interesting question. When you look at alcohol, the consumption of alcohol is haram. Alcohol has both a physical effect and a spiritual effect. Yes? If I ask you, what are the physical effects of alcohol? You say it paralyzes the mind, it paralyzes the aql. It's for that reason that Allah has made it haram. It's sahih. Then what about eating food that is not considered to be halal? Yeah, I go to the supermarket, I buy, for example, a pack of burgers, which is haram. Does it have the same effect as alcohol? According to the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, they indicate that there are certain riwayats indicate to us that when we consume that which is haram, it has a physical effect on us just as how alcohol has an effect on us. So for example, there's a narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam where he says that if a person was to consume that which is considered to be maita, that which is not halal, meat which is not considered to be halal, he says there are three effects that takes place in the life of the human being. Number one, he becomes weak. He becomes lethargic. He becomes what? Lazy. Number two, it begins to affect his lineage. It becomes difficult for this person to conceive or to have children. And number three, he's prone to imminent death. Sudden death is part of it's how he will leave this world. Sudden death. So you find that by consuming blood, by consuming, for example, urine, anything which is considered to be haram, it has a biological, physical effect on the life of the human being, and it has a spiritual effect as well. Someone may come and ask the question, what spiritual effects? What are the spiritual effects of consuming that which is haram? There's a beautiful story at the time of Mahdi al-Abbasi. They say one of the Abbasid kings by the name of Mahdi, he lived in a time where there was a scholar by the name of Sheikh al-Nakhai. Sheikh al-Nakhai was ma'aruf amongst his community. He was considered to be a scholar, an alim, abid, zahid. All of these amazing qualities was found in this personality. Mahdi al-Abbasi wanted to establish a relationship with him. Because you'll find this in history, when you read the books of history, many of the rulers wanted to establish a relationship with the ulama. Even today, we have people in our communities, and in the global communities, mashallah, they have everything in this world. Yes, they have the wealth, they have the families, they have the lineage, they have the influence in society, but there is one thing they do not have, and that is the backing of the ulama. So you find that they try and establish a relationship with the ulama so that they can give them ijazah and so on and so forth. It exists even today. Mahdi al-Abbasi wanted to establish a relationship with Sheikh al-Nakhai. They say one day he sends a messenger to Sheikh. He says, "Oh Sheikh, a message has been delivered to you from the king Mahdi." Sheikh replies, he says, "What is the message?" He says, "Mahdi al-Abbasi, the king, the emir, is offering you a job." He says, "What's the job?" He says, "The job is that you serve him as a judge. And the Supreme Courts, in the court of law, you are his judge. This is the job offer. He will pay you 1,000 dinars a month." Sheikh al-Nakhai was clever. He knew exactly what the king wanted from him. He wanted to establish an association with him. And of course, the king being a zalim, being an oppressive king, Sheikh wanted nothing to do with the king. He did not want to be associated with the king, so he refused the offer. He said, "Thank you, but no thanks." The messenger returned to Mahdi al-Abbasi. Mahdi al-Abbasi was angered when he heard about the refusal of Sheikh. The next day he sends another message. The messenger goes to Shuraik. He says, Ya Shuraik, I've come with another message. He says, what's the message? He says, the message is a job offer, another job offer. He says, what's the job offer? He says, the king wants you to be a mentor for his children, that you become their personal tutor. You are an alim in the community. Give some of your ilm to his children, to his sons. Shuraik again understood the reason behind why the king wanted to associate himself with him. So he refused the job offer. He said, thank you, but no thanks. When Mahdi al-Abbasi heard that he was refused twice in a row, he was infuriated. On the third day, he said, summon him, bring him to me. I'll speak to Shuraik personally. Shuraik al-Nakhai is summoned to the king. He comes into the presence of the king. The king approaches him. He says, Shuraik, I'll keep it short. You're busy, I'm busy. I'll cut straight to the point. He says, I'm giving you 3 options. Choose one of these 3 options. If you do not choose any one of these 3 options, I have a very special place for you in my prisons. So Shuraik is in a situation, he has to choose one of these 3 options. He says, Ya Amir, what's these 3 options? He says, as I said, either you serve me as a judge in my Supreme Court, or you begin to teach and become a mentor for my children, or you have dinner with me one day. That's all I ask for, dinner. Shuraik, he picks the 3rd option. Why? Because it's the easiest option. It's an in and out situation, isn't it? He doesn't have to interact with the king. In fact, he says to himself, he says, if I become a judge for the king, then that means I have to interact with him on a daily basis, and that's bad for my reputation and my image. He says, if I begin to teach his sons, again, I have to interact with him on a daily basis. Again, this is not good for my image. He says, I'll have dinner with you. It's the easiest option compared to the other 2. The king is delighted. He says, fine, on this day, at this time, come to the palace and we'll have dinner together. Shuraik leaves. On that day, they say the appointment was towards the end of the day, so that it builds up the hunger in Shuraik's belly. Yes, the king then goes to the chefs, and he tells the chefs, he says, prepare a meal like you've never prepared before. Lots in amount, a good amount, and prepare the most delicious of meals. They say when the order was given, they prepared the meal. It was time for the dinner. Shuraik approaches the palace. He enters the dining room and he sits down to have a meal. Now remember, this is Mahdi al-Abbasi. Yes, the Abbasid dynasties, they were known to be amongst the oppressors. Yes, they oppressed their people. They were the killers of the Imams alayhim salam. As if this person is going to worry about where the meat has come from or where the chicken has come from. Yes, everything on that dining table guaranteed it was haram. It wasn't halal. Shuraik sits down and he begins to consume. He begins to eat. He eats, and he eats. He eats his fill. He's stuffed. By the time the evening ends, he gets up and he walks away. He leaves. He goes home. The chef turns to one of his wazirs, the king's wazir. He says, you see that man walking out of the palace? He says, who? Shuraik al-Nakhai? He says, yes, Shuraik al-Nakhai. When he entered the palace, he was Shuraik al-Nakhai. But now, as he leaves the palace, he is no longer Shuraik al-Nakhai. They say within 10 days, the king summoned Shuraik. Shuraik, when he heard that the king has summoned him, he began running towards the king. First, when the king summoned him the first time, he was hesitant. I'm going towards the presence of one of the zalims, yes, one of the zalimeen. Yes, he was very hesitant approaching the king, but now he began running towards the king. The 3rd time the king summoned him after 10 days or within 10 days, the 3rd time Shuraik al-Nakhai ran towards the king. Within 10 days after that, the king summoned him the 4th time. The 4th time, Shuraik al-Nakhai ran towards the king. The narrator of this particular narration, he says that it wasn't long until Shuraik al-Nakhai became the judge, the supreme judge for the king. He said it wasn't long after that when he became the judge, he became a mentor for his children as well. The 2 most loathsome things that Shuraik al-Nakhai did not want to do, he ended up doing. Why? Because of one dinner, one sitting that he had with the king. They said they developed a friendship to such an extent that Shuraik al-Nakhai was considered to be one of the wazirs of the king as well. To the extent that the narration goes on to explain, he says that one day, a man from Bayt al-Mal would go around paying the wages of the people. So what would happen at the end of the month or the beginning of the month? A man from Bayt al-Mal would carry a big load of monies, and he would go around paying all of the people who work for the government. They say one day he came towards Shuraik al-Nakhai, and he took out a bag of coins and he gave it to Shuraik. He says, look how Shuraik changed. He said he opened the bag and he began counting the money. He began counting the coins. He said he realized that the coin or the bag of the coin was less than what he was promised. It was less than his promised wages. So he turns to this person who has distributed the wealth, the wages, and he has a go at him. He says, why have you paid me less? There are a few coins are missing from this bag. The man replies, he says, I am sorry, but I came to you last. I paid all of the other employees, and then you were the only one left, so I came to you. It turns out that my bag it did not have enough cash, it did not have enough money. Tomorrow I'll come and I'll pay you and I'll give you the rest. The narration says, Shuraik lost it in this moment. Yes, he began shouting at the man. He says, do you not know who I am? I am the king's wazir, I am the king's this, I am the tutor for his children, I have this position with the king, this, that. The man then begins to shout back at the king, at Shuraik. Yes, so there's an argument now going on. Why? Because of a few dinars. Remember, Shuraik al-Nakhai was considered to be an abid, zahid. Yes, a zahid is a person who does not let the world entice him and seduce him. But look how he changed. To the extent that the man says to Shuraik, he says, Ya Shuraik, have I bought something from you that I have not paid you, and for you to behave with me in this way? Have you sold me something that I am now indebted to you? Shuraik replies, he says, I have sold the greatest thing and the most valuable things that I had in my hands. So the man replies, he says, what did you sell? He said, I sold my religion. At times when we consume haram, effects takes place within our nafs. Physically we may be fine and well, but spiritually it destroys us from within. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us more mindful to what we eat and what we consume. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.